The crystal wine glass slipped from Simone Parker's trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of her own kitchen. But the sound couldn't drown out the words that had just destroyed her world. "I'm only keeping her because of her fortune," David's voice carried clearly through the slightly open patio door. "Trust me, baby, the minute I can figure out how to get half of Parker Innovations, I'm done with this charade." Simone pressed her back against the kitchen wall, her heart hammering so hard she was sure it would burst. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of believing in love, in partnership, in the man who had swept her off her feet when she was just starting her tech company. But what about her family money? Candace's voice was silky, satisfied. "Didn't you say she inherited millions?" David's laugh was cold, calculating. "That's exactly why I married her. The company was worth maybe $2 million when we met. Now it's worth $40 million and growing. Plus her grandmother's trust fund. I've been playing the long game, sweetheart." Simone's legs gave out. She slid down the wall, designer dress catching on the textured surface, until she was sitting on the cold floor surrounded by glass fragments that sparkled like the tears now streaming down her face. "You're so smart, baby," Candace purred. "How much longer do you think? My lawyer says if I can prove she's mentally unstable or having an affair, I could get more than half. I've been documenting every time she works late, every business trip, making it look suspicious." The patio furniture creaked as they moved. Simone scrambled to her feet, grabbing paper towels to clean up the glass with shaking hands. She had to get upstairs before they came back inside. She had to think. She had to breathe. But she couldn't breathe. 8 years of "I love you." 8 years of shared dreams, of building a life together, of her believing she had found her soulmate. 8 years of her pouring her heart, her money, her trust into a man who saw her as nothing more than a business transaction. "The best part," David continued, his voice growing clearer as they approached the door, "is that she actually thinks I love her. She's so desperate to be loved, it's almost pathetic." Simone dropped the paper towels, glass cutting into her palm as she gripped the counter. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony ripping through her chest. She thought of every time she'd worked 18-hour days to grow the company. Every time she'd celebrated a business victory and David had been right there, championing her success. Every time she transferred money to their joint account, funded their lifestyle, bought him expensive gifts. Every time she'd been grateful he loved her despite her success, despite her ambition, despite her being too much for most men. The patio door slid open. "Simone." David's voice was suddenly warm, loving, concerned. The same voice that had whispered sweet words in her ear just that morning. "Baby, what happened? Why is there glass everywhere?" She turned slowly, taking in his handsome face, his perfectly styled brown hair, his concerned expression. Behind him, Candace was smoothing down her blonde hair, lipstick slightly smudged, looking like the cat who'd swallowed the canary. I dropped my wine glass," Simone managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh, honey, let me help." David moved toward her, and she flinched away instinctively. His brow furrowed with what looked like genuine concern. "Are you hurt? You look pale." "I'm fine." The words came out stronger than she felt. "I just need to go upstairs." "Simone, this is Candace Rivers from Morrison Marketing. I told you about her, remember? We're discussing the campaign for our new client." Simone looked at Candace, really looked at her. Young, blonde, beautiful in that effortless way that Simone had spent years feeling insecure about. The kind of woman David used to date before he met Simone. Before he discovered that brilliant black women could make him rich. "Nice to meet you," Simone said, her voice hollow. Candace smiled, a predatory expression. "David talks about you all the time. He's so proud of your little company." Little company. Simone had built Parker Innovations from nothing into a $40 million tech empire. She employed 300 people. She'd been featured on the cover of Forbes. And this woman called it a little company. "We should probably finish up our meeting," David said smoothly. "Simone, why don't you go rest? You've been working so hard lately." She nodded, not trusting her voice. As she walked toward the stairs, she could hear them settling back into the living room, their voices low and intimate. Planning her destruction while sitting on furniture she'd bought, in a house she'd purchased, discussing a future built on the ruins of her heart. In her bedroom, Simone sat on the edge of their king-size bed and stared at her reflection in the mirror across the room. 42 years old, beautiful, successful, intelligent. A woman who had everything except the one thing she thought she had. A husband who loved her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Diane, her best friend and business partner. "Girl, where are you? We need to review the Henderson contract." Simone stared at the message. Life was continuing. Business was continuing. The world was spinning on its axis while hers had completely stopped. She typed back, "Family emergency. Handle it for me? Everything okay?" Simone's fingers hovered over the keyboard. How do you tell your best friend that your entire marriage is a lie? That the man you've loved and trusted for 8 years sees you as nothing more than a bank account? "I'll call you tomorrow." Downstairs she could hear laughter. David's deep chuckle and Candace's high giggle. They were laughing. While her heart was breaking into a million pieces, they were laughing. Simone stood up and walked to her walk-in closet. Designer clothes hung in perfect rows, shoes organized by color and season, jewelry sparkling in custom display cases. All of it purchased with her money. All of it part of the image David wanted to project. She pulled out her laptop and sat cross-legged on the closet floor, surrounded by the trappings of her success. Her fingers moved across the keyboard almost automatically, pulling up bank statements, business documents, legal papers. Everything David had access to. Everything he was planning to take. But Simone Parker hadn't built a $40 million company by being naive. And she certainly hadn't gotten where she was by letting people steal from her. As the numbers filled her screen, something shifted inside her chest. The crushing pain was still there, but alongside it, something else was growing. Something harder. Stronger. They wanted to play games with her heart, her life, her fortune? Game on. 3 days later, Simone sat in her corner office on the 40th floor of the Parker Innovations building, staring out at the Atlanta skyline. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard David's voice. "I'm only keeping her because of her fortune." Knock knock. Diane Brooks appeared in the doorway, her dark eyes immediately scanning Simone's face with the precision of both a best friend and a lawyer. "You look like hell. Thanks for the honesty." Simone managed a weak smile as Diane closed the door behind her. "I've been worried sick. You missed the Henderson meeting, you haven't returned my calls, and Rebecca said you've been here until midnight every night." Diane settled into the chair across from Simone's desk. "What's going on? And don't say nothing, because I've known you for 15 years. Simone opened her mouth to deflect, to make excuses, to protect David the way she'd been protecting him for 3 days. Then she remembered his laugh. That cold, calculating laugh as he discussed her like a business acquisition. "David is having an affair," she said quietly. Diane's expression went from concern to furious in half a second. "That piece of," she caught herself, took a deep breath. "Are you sure? I heard him talking to her. In our house. On our patio." Simone's voice was steady now, the shock wearing off into something harder. "He told her he only married me for my money." The silence stretched between them. Diane's hands gripped the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles were pale against her dark skin. "Word for word, Simone. Tell me exactly what he said." So Simone did. Every cruel word, every calculated plan, every dismissive laugh. By the time she finished, Diane was pacing behind the chair, her legal mind clearly working. "How long?" Diane asked. "I don't know. Maybe months. Maybe years." The words tasted bitter. "He mentioned documenting my work habits, trying to make me look like I'm having affairs because of my business trips. That son of a..." Diane stopped, looked at Simone. "I'm sorry, girl. I know you love him." "Do I?" The question surprised Simone as much as it did Diane. "I thought I did. But how can you love someone who never existed? The man I married, the man I fell in love with, he was just a character David was playing." Diane sat back down, leaning forward. "What do you want to do?" "I want to hurt him the way he hurt me." The admission came out fierce, surprising them both. "I want him to feel what it's like to have everything you believe in ripped away." "Legally speaking?" Simone turned back to the window. Down below, people moved like ants through the streets of Atlanta, living their lives, trusting their partners, believing in love. Had she ever been that innocent? "I've been thinking," she said slowly. "David has access to everything. Our joint accounts, my business information, even some of the Parker Innovations board meetings when I brought him as my plus one. Conflict of interest? Potentially. But more than that. He knows our expansion plans, our acquisition targets, our financial projections." Simone pulled up a document on her computer. "I've been reviewing everything he's had access to." "Diane, what if he's been feeding information to competitors?" Diane's eyes sharpened. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet. But Morrison Marketing, Candace's company, they landed 3 accounts this year that we were bidding on. 3 major accounts where they somehow knew exactly what to bid to beat us by just a few $1,000s. That's not coincidence. No, it's not. Simone felt that strange new strength growing in her chest. I've been so focused on how he betrayed me personally that I missed how he might have betrayed my company. Diane stood up. We need to document everything. Bank records, email communications, meeting notes. If David has been passing inside information to his mistress's company, that's corporate espionage. That's criminal. They looked at each other, the weight of this possibility settling between them. Simone, Diane said carefully, if we pursue this, there's no going back. It won't just be a divorce. It could be criminal charges. Good. The word came out harder than Simone intended. Maybe it's time David learned that actions have consequences. Her phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, along with his photo from their wedding day. He looked so happy, so loving. Such a good actor. Mrs. Parker? Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Your husband is here to see you. Simone and Diane exchanged glances. Send him in, Simone said. David walked through the door like he owned the place, which Simone realized with sick clarity he probably thought he did. He was perfectly dressed as always, his smile warm and loving as his eyes swept over her with what she now recognized as calculation rather than concern. Hi, baby. He moved around the desk to kiss her cheek and she forced herself not to recoil. I was worried about you. You seemed upset the other night. I'm fine, she said, hating how easily the lie came. Diane. David's smile became more forced. He'd never liked Diane, always said she was too protective, too suspicious. Now Simone understood why. David. Diane's voice could have frozen water. I was thinking, David continued, turning back to Simone, maybe we should take a vacation. Just the two of us. Get away from all this work stress. I can't leave right now. We're in the middle of 3 major negotiations. That's exactly why you need a break. You're working yourself to death. His hand touched her shoulder and she fought not to shrug it off. Let Diane handle things for a week. That's what business partners are for, right? Get her away. Isolate her. Simone could see the strategy now, could read the manipulation in every gesture. Maybe after the Henderson deal closes, she said. The Henderson deal? David's eyes sharpened almost imperceptibly. How's that going? There it was. The real reason for his visit. Henderson Industries was Parker Innovation's biggest potential client. The contract would be worth $15 million over 3 years. It's progressing, Simone said carefully. Any idea when they'll make their decision? Diane cleared her throat. I should get going. Simone, we'll continue our discussion later? Yes. Thank you, Diane. After Diane left, David moved closer. You two seemed intense when I walked in. Everything okay with the partnership? Fine. Just business. David nodded, but she could see his mind working. You know, baby, I've been thinking. With the company growing so fast, maybe it's time to bring in some outside management consultation. Get a fresh perspective on operations. I don't need outside management consultation. Of course you don't. You're brilliant. His smile was patronizing. I just mean someone objective. Someone who could look at inefficiencies, redundancies. Maybe even partnership structures. Partnership structures. He wanted to break up her partnership with Diane. Remove her strongest ally. That's an interesting idea, Simone said, playing dumb. Do you have someone in mind? Actually, I've been talking to some people. There's a firm that specializes in tech companies our size. Morrison Consulting. Morrison. Like Morrison Marketing. Like Candace Rivers. I'll think about it, Simone said. David leaned down and kissed her forehead. I love how dedicated you are to this company. It's one of the things I adore about you. After he left, Simone sat in her chair, staring at the closed door. Morrison Consulting. He wasn't just stealing from her personally and professionally, he was setting up a systematic takeover of everything she'd built. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. My office. No. And bring everything. Simone gathered her laptop, her files, and what was left of her trust in humanity. It was time to fight back. But first she had some investigating to do. Diane's law office occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek building in downtown Atlanta, with glass walls that offered panoramic views of the city. But Simone barely noticed the scenery as she spread documents across Diane's conference table like a general planning a war. Look at this, Simone pointed to a bank statement. 3 transfers to our joint account from Morrison Marketing over the past 6 months. Small amounts, $500 here, $800 there. Consultation fees. Diane studied the statements through her reading glasses. For what kind of consultation? That's what I intend to find out. Simone pulled up an email on her laptop. I found this in David's sent folder. He's been forwarding our board meeting minutes to an email address I don't recognize. You hacked his email? I know his passwords. We've been married 8 years, Diane. He uses our wedding date for everything. The irony tasted bitter in her mouth. That won't hold up in court if he claims privacy violation. Then we don't use it in court. We use it to figure out what we're dealing with. Simone pulled up another document. But this will hold up. David signed confidentiality agreements when I started bringing him to board meetings. Any information he shared is a direct violation of those agreements. Diane nodded approvingly. That's actionable. What else? I called our IT department. David has been accessing our shared server from his office at the law firm. Downloading files he has no business reason to access. Client lists, financial projections, strategic plans. When did this start? Right around the time Morrison Marketing started winning bids against us. Simone felt that familiar surge of anger and betrayal. Diane, he's been playing a long game. This isn't just about divorce assets. This is corporate espionage. Diane leaned back in her chair. Corporate espionage carries serious penalties. We're talking federal charges, potential prison time. Good. Simone. Diane's voice was gentle but firm. I need you to think carefully about this. Yes, David betrayed you in the worst possible way. Yes, he deserves consequences. But criminal charges will destroy his life completely. He was planning to destroy mine. I know. But you're not him. You're better than that. Simone stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the busy street below. People heading home to families who loved them. People who trusted their partners. People who believed in happily ever after. 8 years, Diane. 8 years of my life. 8 years of believing I wasn't good enough, that I needed to be grateful he loved me despite my success. 8 years of making myself smaller so he wouldn't feel threatened. You never made yourself smaller. Didn't I? Simone turned back to face her friend. How many times did I downplay our wins so he wouldn't feel bad about his career? How many times did I let him take credit for my ideas at dinner parties? How many times did I apologize for working late instead of pointing out that my work was paying for our entire lifestyle? Diane was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? I want justice. I want him to face real consequences for what he's done. And I want to make sure he can never do this to anyone else. Okay. Diane pulled out a legal pad. Let's build a case. They worked for 3 hours, cataloging evidence, building timelines, connecting dots. By the time they finished, they had documented a pattern of systematic theft, corporate espionage, and marital fraud that went back almost 2 years. We need more, Diane said finally. We need direct evidence of communication between David and Candace about Parker Innovations' business. How do we get that? We could hire a private investigator. No. Simone's mind was racing. I have a better idea. The next morning, Simone sat in her kitchen, watching David read the newspaper and drink coffee she'd made with hands that shook with rage. He looked so normal, so innocent. If she hadn't heard him with her own ears, she would never have suspected. David, she said carefully, I've been thinking about your suggestion. About Morrison Consulting. His head came up immediately, eyes alert. Really? I think it could be incredibly valuable. I'd like to meet with them. Unofficially, of course. Just to get a feel for their approach. I think that's a great idea. I could set something up. Actually, I was thinking I could do it myself. More objective that way. David's smile faltered slightly. But they don't know you. I have an existing relationship with them. Through your law firm? Yes, exactly. He relaxed again. I've worked with them on several client cases. They're very discreet, very professional. Liar. She could see it now, could read the lies in his body language. How had she missed it before? Who would I meet with? I'll need to check, but probably someone from their strategic planning division. Maybe their marketing team. Marketing team. Like Candace Rivers. That sounds perfect, Simone said. Could you set up a lunch meeting? Somewhere neutral. Of course, baby. I'll make some calls today. After David left for work, Simone called Diane. He took the bait. He's setting up a meeting with Morrison Consulting. Please tell me you're not planning to go in there alone. I won't be alone. You're coming with me. Simone. As my legal counsel. Perfectly normal to have my lawyer present for any business consultation. And what exactly are we hoping to accomplish? We're going to give them an opportunity to incriminate themselves. David thinks I'm naive, that I don't suspect anything. We're going to let them think they're playing me while we gather evidence. This is dangerous territory. If they realize what we're doing, they won't. Because they think I'm just the rich wife who got lucky with a tech company. They think I'm stupid. You're not stupid. But you might be reckless. Simone thought about that. Maybe she was being reckless. But she'd spent 8 years being careful, being trusting, being the good wife. Where had it gotten her? I'd rather be reckless than be a victim. That afternoon, David called with the meeting details. Lunch at the Four Seasons, tomorrow at noon, with Morrison Consulting's strategic planning team. They're very excited to meet with you, he said. This could be the beginning of something really big for Parker Innovations. I'm sure it could be, Simone replied, and for the first time in days she meant it. But not in the way David expected. The Four Seasons restaurant was exactly the kind of place David would choose. Expensive, impressive, designed to intimidate. Simone sat across from Candace Rivers and 2 other Morrison Consulting executives, with Diane beside her, watching every micro-expression on their faces. Mrs. Parker, Candace smiled warmly, extending a perfectly manicured hand. It's so wonderful to finally meet you properly. David speaks of you constantly. I bet he does, Simone thought, shaking the hand of the woman who was sleeping with her husband. Call me Simone. And thank you for taking this meeting. The 2 other executives introduced themselves as Robert Chin and Lisa Morrison, apparently the company's founder. Simone filed away their names and faces, her mind recording every detail for later analysis. David tells us you're considering bringing in strategic consulting for Parker Innovations, Robert said, opening his portfolio. We've had tremendous success with tech companies at your stage of growth. What stage would that be? Simone asked innocently. Well, based on our research, you're at about 40 million in revenue, experiencing rapid expansion, looking at potential acquisitions. Lisa's smile was professional but predatory. Companies at this stage often struggle with operational efficiency and strategic focus. Research. They'd done research on her company without her permission, without any formal agreement. Simone glanced at Diane, who was taking careful notes. What kind of research? Diane asked. Public records, industry reports, the usual due diligence, Candace said smoothly. We like to understand our potential clients thoroughly. Of course, Simone nodded. And what have you concluded about Parker Innovations? Robert opened a folder. Impressive growth trajectory, but we see some concerning patterns. Heavy reliance on single partnerships, potential vulnerabilities in your competitive positioning, and what appears to be some internal structural inefficiencies. Such as your partnership structure, for example. Splitting decision-making authority between 2 partners can create bottlenecks and conflicting strategies. They wanted to break up her partnership with Diane, just like David had suggested. Interesting perspective, Simone said. What would you recommend? Consolidation of authority, Lisa said. One clear leader with other partners taking more advisory roles. It's more efficient and creates clearer accountability. And who would you recommend as this clear leader? Candace leaned forward. Well, as the original founder and primary vision holder, obviously you would maintain control. But you might benefit from bringing in experienced management consultants to handle day-to-day operations. Like Morrison Consulting, no doubt. David mentioned you've worked with other tech companies, Simone said. Can you give me some examples? The 3 exchanged glances. Due to confidentiality agreements, we can't share specific client details, Robert said. But we can tell you that we've helped several companies in your sector optimize their competitive positioning. By optimizing, you mean? Strategic market analysis, competitive intelligence, positioning strategies. Competitive intelligence. Simone felt her anger rise but kept her expression neutral. That sounds fascinating. Can you give me a general example of how competitive intelligence works? Candace practically lit up. Well, for instance, let's say Company A is bidding against Company B for a major contract. If Company A understands Company B's cost structure, strategic priorities, and bidding history, they can position their own bid more effectively. And how would Company A get that information about Company B? There are many legitimate sources, Lisa said quickly. Industry contacts, public filings, networking relationships. Industry contacts, Simone repeated. Like what kind of contacts? Well, Candace glanced at her colleagues. Sometimes companies have relationships with law firms, consulting groups, even personal connections that provide market insights. Personal connections. Like sleeping with the competition's spouse. That's very strategic, Simone said. Have you used those kinds of insights to help clients bid against Parker Innovations specifically? The silence at the table was deafening. Robert cleared his throat. As I mentioned, we can't discuss specific client situations. But hypothetically, Simone pressed, if you had access to Parker Innovations' internal information, that would give your other clients a significant advantage, wouldn't it? Mrs. Parker, Lisa's voice was carefully controlled, I'm not sure what you're implying, but Morrison Consulting operates with the highest ethical standards. Of course, I'm not implying anything. I'm just trying to understand your methodology. Simone smiled sweetly. David has been so helpful in explaining how strategic consulting works. Candace went very still. David has. Oh yes. He shared so many insights about competitive positioning, market intelligence, the importance of having inside information. Simone leaned forward slightly. In fact, he's shown me some fascinating examples of how companies can gain advantages through personal relationships and confidential information sharing. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. I think there might be some confusion, Robert said carefully. David's relationship with our firm is strictly professional. Is it? Simone pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos until she found the one she'd taken yesterday. David and Candace having an intimate lunch at a restaurant across town, his hand covering hers on the table. Because this looks pretty personal to me. Candace's face went white. Lisa and Robert stared at the photo, then at Candace, understanding dawning in their expressions. Mrs. Parker, Lisa started. I think we're done here, Diane said, standing up. Simone, we should go. But Simone wasn't finished. 8 years of pain and betrayal had built up to this moment, and she wasn't leaving without making her point. Before we go, she said, her voice deadly calm, I want to make something very clear. I know about the affair. I know about the information sharing. I know about the bid rigging. And I know about the systematic plan to destroy my company and steal my assets. Candace looked like she might be sick. Simone, Mrs. Parker, Simone corrected coldly. And you don't get to speak. You've done enough. She stood up, Diane beside her. You thought you were dealing with some naive wife who got lucky in business. You thought you could manipulate me, use me, destroy everything I've built. You were wrong. Lisa found her voice. Mrs. Parker, if there have been any improprieties. If. Simone's laugh was sharp. There's no if about it. There are bank records, email trails, confidentiality agreements violations, and corporate espionage. Federal crimes, Ms. Morrison. She leaned down, placing both hands on the table. You wanted to play games with my life, my marriage, my company? Congratulations. You just played yourselves. As they walked out of the restaurant, Diane grabbed Simone's arm. Please tell me you were recording that. Simone patted her purse, where her phone had been recording the entire conversation. Every word. That was incredibly dangerous and incredibly stupid, Diane said as they reached the parking garage. And incredibly satisfying. They'll warn David. They'll destroy evidence. They'll lawyer up. Good. Let them scramble. Let them panic. Let them feel what it's like to have their world turned upside down. Simone got into her car, her hands shaking with adrenaline. For the first time in 8 years, she felt powerful. For the first time since she'd heard David's betrayal, she felt in control. Her phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. She smiled and answered. Hello, darling. Simone, what the hell did you just do? I had lunch with Morrison Consulting. Wasn't that what you wanted? You know damn well that's not what I meant. Candace called me, she said. She said what, David? What exactly did she say? Silence on the other end of the line. That's what I thought, Simone said. See you at home, sweetheart. We need to talk. She hung up and drove home, her heart pounding with anticipation. The game had officially begun. Simone poured herself a glass of wine and sat in her living room waiting. The house was silent except for the ticking of the antique clock she'd bought for their 5th anniversary. Another symbol of her naive faith in their marriage. At 6:47 p.m., she heard David's BMW in the driveway. His footsteps on the front walk were heavier than usual, his key turning in the lock with more force than necessary. He walked into the living room like a man heading to his execution. We need to talk, he said, but his usual confidence was gone. Yes, we do. Simone didn't get up, didn't invite him to sit. How long, David? How long what? Don't. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. We're past the point of lying. How long have you been sleeping with Candace Rivers? David sank into the chair across from her, suddenly looking older than his 45 years. Simone. How long? 8 months. 8 months. While she'd been working 18-hour days to close the Henderson deal. While she'd been planning their anniversary vacation. While she'd been believing she had a marriage worth fighting for. And how long have you been stealing from my company? I wasn't stealing. Corporate espionage then. How long have you been feeding my business information to Morrison Consulting? David's jaw tightened. It wasn't supposed to go this far. What wasn't supposed to go this far? Destroying my company? Destroying our marriage? Or destroying me? I never wanted to hurt you. Simone laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You never wanted to hurt me? David, you told your mistress that you only married me for my money. You called our entire relationship a charade. You've been systematically planning to steal half my life's work. But you never wanted to hurt me? The money thing, that was just talk. I was trying to impress her. By telling her you didn't love your wife? David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. I do love you, Simone. In my way. Your way. The words exploded out of her. Your way is to lie to me for 8 years? Your way is to see me as a business opportunity? Your way is to plan my destruction while I'm sleeping next to you every night. She stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, their neighbors were living normal lives. Inside, her world was burning down. I know how this looks, David said. How it looks. She spun around to face him. David, I have recordings. I have bank records. I have email evidence. I have testimony from Morrison Consulting executives who just admitted to corporate espionage. This isn't about how it looks. This is about what you've done. What recordings? Today's lunch meeting. Your conversations with Candace about competitive intelligence. Your plans to manipulate me into bringing in outside consultants to break up my partnership with Diane. Simone's voice was getting stronger with each word. Your systematic plan to isolate me, destabilize my company, and steal everything I've built. David's face went completely white. You can't use those recordings. They were obtained without consent. Actually, I can. Georgia is a one-party consent state, and I was a party to both conversations. My lawyer confirmed it this afternoon. Your lawyer? Diane knows about this. Diane's been helping me build a federal case against you for corporate espionage. The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. David stared at her, perhaps seeing her clearly for the first time in their marriage. Federal case? Corporate espionage is a federal crime, David. Theft of trade secrets. Fraudulent use of confidential information. Conspiracy to defraud. We're talking about serious prison time. David's hands were shaking now. Simone, please. We can work this out. We can fix this. Fix this. She walked back to her chair but didn't sit. How do you fix 8 years of lies? How do you fix systematic betrayal? How do you fix a husband who sees his wife as nothing more than a source of income? I know I made mistakes. Mistakes. Her voice rose. Spilling wine on the carpet is a mistake. Forgetting our anniversary is a mistake. What you did was calculated, deliberate, and malicious. I'll end it with Candace. I'll quit Morrison Consulting. I'll do whatever you want. What I want. Simone felt something breaking loose inside her chest. What I want is my 8 years back. What I want is to not have wasted the best years of my life on a man who was using me. What I want is to go back to before I knew that every "I love you" was a lie. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice remained steady. What I want is impossible, David. Because you can't undo what you've done. You can't make me believe in you again. You can't make me trust you again. You can't make me love you again. So that's it? You're just going to destroy my life. The audacity of the statement hit her like a physical blow. I'm going to destroy your life? David, you destroyed mine. You destroyed our marriage. You destroyed 8 years of partnership and trust and love. All I'm doing is making sure you face consequences for your choices. I'll lose my law license. I'll go to prison. My career will be over. Yes, it will be. Her voice was calm now, resolved. Just like you planned to end mine. David stood up, desperation making him aggressive. You don't understand the position you're putting yourself in. If this goes public, if there's a criminal case, the scandal will hurt Parker Innovations too. Your reputation will be affected. Your business relationships. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to make you see reason. We can handle this quietly. Divorce, asset division, everyone moves on. But if you pursue criminal charges, if I pursue justice for what you've done to me and my company, you'll make sure I suffer for it? That's not what I... Get out. The words came out quietly but with absolute finality. Simone. Get out of my house. Now. This is my house too. This house was purchased entirely with my money. The mortgage is in my name. You have no legal claim to it. She pulled out her phone. I can call the police and have you removed, or you can leave voluntarily. Your choice. David stared at her for a long moment, perhaps finally understanding that the woman he'd manipulated and underestimated for 8 years was gone. In her place stood someone harder, stronger, and completely done with his games. I'll need to get some clothes. 5 minutes. Take what you need for a few days. We'll arrange for you to get the rest later. She watched him walk upstairs, listening to drawers opening and closing, hangers sliding across rods. The sounds of a marriage ending. When he came back down with a suitcase, he paused at the front door. I did love you, Simone. Whatever else you believe, that was real. She looked at him standing there, this man she'd built her life around, this stranger who'd worn her husband's face for 8 years. No, David. It wasn't. Love doesn't plan betrayal. Love doesn't see the person they claim to care about as a business opportunity. Love doesn't lie for years while plotting destruction. She opened the door. What you felt for me was gratitude for the lifestyle I provided. What I felt for you was love. But only one of those things was real. After he left, Simone sat in her living room for a long time, listening to the silence. The house felt different already, cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the air. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. How did it go? Simone typed back, it's over. File the papers tomorrow. Both the divorce and the federal complaint. Are you okay? Simone looked around the living room at the furniture she'd bought, the art she'd chosen, the life she'd built. For the first time in 8 years, it was all hers again. I'm going to be better than okay. I'm going to be free. 3 weeks later, Simone stood in Diane's office, watching news vans line up outside the Parker Innovations building through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The story broke this morning, Diane said, handing her a tablet with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's homepage displayed. Federal charges filed in corporate espionage case involving tech CEO's husband. Simone scrolled through the article, seeing her life reduced to headlines and legal terminology. How bad is it? For David? Career-ending. The Georgia State Bar has opened an investigation. Morrison Consulting lost 3 major clients yesterday. Candace Rivers was terminated this morning. And for me? Diane sat down across from her. Simone, you're being portrayed as the victim who fought back. The business community is rallying around you. I fielded 6 calls this morning from other tech CEOs offering support. But David's lawyer is going to make this ugly. He's claiming emotional distress, that you're using the legal system for revenge, that the evidence was obtained improperly. Simone set down the tablet. Let him try. There's something else. Ruby Parker called this morning. David's mother. Simone hadn't spoken to her since the night David moved out. What did she say? She wants to see you. She said it's important. 2 hours later, Simone sat in the elegant living room of Ruby Parker's Buckhead home, holding a cup of tea in china so fine she was afraid to breathe on it. Ruby Parker was 77 years old, silver-haired, and had the kind of quiet dignity that came from surviving the Great Depression and raising 4 children as a widow. She'd always been kind to Simone, but they'd never been particularly close. I owe you an apology, Ruby said without preamble. Mrs. Parker, you don't? I do. Ruby set down her own cup with steady hands. I knew what David was. Simone went very still. What do you mean? I knew he married you for your money. I knew he was incapable of the kind of love you deserved. And I said nothing. The words hit Simone like physical blows. You knew. David's father was the same way. Charming, handsome, completely self-centered. He married me because my family had money and social connections. When the money ran out, when my father's business failed, he left me with 4 small children and a mountain of debt. Ruby's voice was steady, but her eyes were sad. I should have warned you. I should have told you what I saw. But I was hoping I was wrong. I was hoping David would be better than his father. Why are you telling me this now? Because David came to see me yesterday. He's trying to get family members to speak for him, to say this is all a misunderstanding, that you're being vindictive. And? Ruby's smile was sharp. I told him I'd rather burn this house down than lie for him the way I lied for his father. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 women connected by the betrayal of men who'd claimed to love them. Mrs. Parker. Ruby. After 8 years, I think you can call me Ruby. Ruby, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I couldn't save your son from himself. Oh, honey. Ruby reached over and took Simone's hand. You couldn't save him because he didn't want to be saved. Some people are just born broken. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? The criminal charges, I mean? Ruby was quiet for a long moment. When my husband left, I had no recourse. No way to make him face consequences for what he'd done. I watched him move on to another woman with money, and I knew she'd suffer the same way I had. She squeezed Simone's hand. You have the power to stop David from doing this to someone else. That's not revenge, sweetheart. That's justice. That evening, Simone sat in her home office, reviewing the final documents for the federal case. Bank records, email trails, recorded conversations, confidentiality agreement violations. It was all there, a complete picture of systematic betrayal and corporate espionage. Her phone rang. Jerome Mitchell's name appeared on the screen. Jerome was the contractor who'd been renovating her new office space. He was also the first man in 8 years who'd made her remember what it felt like to be seen as more than a business opportunity. Hey, his voice was warm, concerned. I saw the news. Are you okay? I'm surviving. That's not what I asked. Simone smiled despite everything. Jerome never let her deflect. It was both irritating and refreshing. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm angry. I'm sad. And I'm proud of myself for fighting back. Good. All of those are appropriate responses to someone trying to destroy your life. The whole city knows now. About the affair, about the corporate espionage, about how stupid I was. You weren't stupid. You were trusting. There's a difference. Is there? Sometimes I wonder if I ignored warning signs because I was so grateful to be loved. Or maybe you ignored warning signs because you're a good person who assumes other people are good too. That's not stupidity, Simone. That's character. She leaned back in her chair. How's Ava adjusting to the new school? Jerome's 8-year-old daughter had been a bright spot in the chaos of the past few weeks. She'd spent several afternoons at Parker Innovations while Jerome worked late, and her innocent questions and infectious laughter had reminded Simone that there was still joy in the world. She's great. She made me promise to tell you that she's practicing her presentation about female entrepreneurs for her class project. Guess who she's presenting about? Please tell me it's not me. It's totally you. She's very impressed that you built a whole company and that you're fighting the bad guys. From the mouths of babes. She's right, you know. You are fighting the bad guys. And you're winning. After they hung up, Simone walked through her house, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness yet, but peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane, final hearing scheduled for next month. Federal prosecutor says they have enough evidence to convict on all counts. Simone typed back, good. It's time to close this chapter. But even as she sent the message, she knew this wasn't just about closing a chapter. It was about writing a new one. A chapter where she didn't apologize for her success, didn't make herself smaller to accommodate someone else's insecurities, and didn't confuse gratitude with love. A chapter where she finally understood her own worth. The courtroom was packed. Simone sat in the front row with Diane, watching David's lawyer make his closing argument. He was painting David as a man who'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to have his life destroyed by a vindictive ex-wife. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defense attorney said, we're not here to excuse David Parker's personal failings. He had an affair. That was wrong. But corporate espionage? That's a serious criminal charge that requires serious evidence. Simone kept her face neutral, but inside she was remembering every email, every violated confidentiality agreement, every piece of stolen information that had been methodically documented over the past month. The prosecution wants you to believe that pillow talk between spouses constitutes corporate espionage. But sharing general business concerns with a romantic partner is not the same as deliberately stealing trade secrets. Pillow talk. 8 months of systematic information theft reduced to pillow talk. The federal prosecutor, Maria Santos, stood for her rebuttal. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who'd built her career on corporate crime cases. Defense counsel wants you to believe this was pillow talk, she said, clicking to the first slide of her presentation. Let's look at what Mr. Parker actually did. The screen showed a timeline of David's activities. Email forwards to Morrison Consulting. Downloaded files from Parker Innovations' secure servers. Bank transfers in exchange for confidential information. This wasn't pillow talk. This was a coordinated effort to steal trade secrets and provide them to Parker Innovations' competitors for financial gain. She clicked to the next slide, showing Morrison Consulting's successful bids against Parker Innovations. 3 major contracts. In each case, Morrison Consulting submitted bids that were just barely lower than Parker Innovations' bids. How did they know exactly what to bid? Another click. David's email to Candace Rivers, sharing Parker Innovations' pricing strategy for the Henderson account. Because David Parker was telling them. The jury looked engaged, taking notes. Simone allowed herself to hope. Defense counsel says this is about a vindictive ex-wife. Let's be clear about what this is really about. Maria Santos turned to face the jury directly. This is about protecting the intellectual property rights that drive innovation and economic growth. This is about ensuring that success is earned through merit, not through theft. This is about holding people accountable when they betray the trust placed in them. 2 hours later, the jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. Corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, conspiracy to defraud, violation of confidentiality agreements. David's face went completely white as the judge read the verdicts. Candace Rivers, who'd taken a plea deal and testified against him, was crying in the back of the courtroom. Simone felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Just exhaustion and a strange sense of closure. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded them. Mrs. Parker, how do you feel about the verdict? I feel that justice was served, Simone said simply. And I'm ready to move forward. Will you pursue civil damages? My focus now is on my company, my employees, and rebuilding trust in the business relationships that were damaged by my ex-husband's actions. Any message for other women who might be in similar situations? Simone paused, thinking of Ruby Parker, of all the women who'd suffered in silence, of her younger self who'd been so grateful for love that she'd ignored warning signs. Trust your instincts. Your success is not something to apologize for. And never let anyone make you feel like you should be grateful for the bare minimum of respect and honesty. That evening, Simone sat in her renovated office, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. The space was beautiful, all glass and light, with a view that reminded her daily of how far she'd come. Jerome had finished the renovation the week before, and it perfectly reflected her vision for Parker Innovations' future. Knock knock. Diane appeared in the doorway with a bottle of champagne. Thought you might want to celebrate. Celebrate what? My marriage ending? My ex-husband going to prison? The whole city knowing the details of my personal life. Diane sat down across from her desk. Celebrate you standing up for yourself. Celebrate justice being served. Celebrate the fact that Parker Innovation stock price is at an all-time high because investors respect leaders who fight for their companies. Is it really? Really? The Henderson deal closed this morning. Full contract terms, plus a 3-year extension option. Turns out, corporate executives appreciate working with people who have integrity. Simone leaned back in her chair. I don't know how to feel about any of this. That's normal. You've been through trauma. It's going to take time to process. I keep thinking about the 8 years. Were there good moments? Was any of it real? Some of it was real for you. That's what matters. Ruby Parker told me she knew what David was from the beginning. She knew he'd married me for money. Ouch. She said some people are just born broken. That I couldn't have saved him because he didn't want to be saved. Diane was quiet for a moment. Do you believe that? I'm starting to. I think David is one of those people who sees relationships as transactions. He wasn't capable of the kind of love I was offering. And that's his loss. Simone's phone buzzed with a text from Jerome. Dinner tomorrow? Ava wants to celebrate your big court win. She made you a card. She smiled, typing back, I'd love that. New man. Diane asked. Maybe. He's different. He sees me as a person, not as a business opportunity. He celebrates my success instead of feeling threatened by it. Novel concept. I'm trying to take it slow. I don't trust my judgment right now. Your judgment is fine. You figured out David was cheating and stealing from you. You built a federal case and won. You protected your company and your employees. Your judgment is excellent. Diane opened the champagne and poured 2 glasses. To new beginnings. Simone raised her glass. To knowing my worth. They drank, looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, David was probably sitting in a jail cell, finally facing consequences for his choices. Somewhere out there, other women were learning to recognize their own value, to trust their instincts, to demand more than the bare minimum. And somewhere in her own heart, Simone was learning to forgive herself for being human enough to believe in love, strong enough to fight for justice, and wise enough to know the difference. 6 months after the trial, Simone stood in her kitchen making breakfast for 3. Jerome sat at the counter reading the newspaper while 8-year-old Ava carefully arranged flowers from the garden in a vase. Miss Simone, Ava said, concentrating on getting a daffodil position just right, are you going to marry my daddy? Jerome choked on his coffee. Ava. What? It's a reasonable question. You like each other. You have sleepovers. And Miss Simone makes better pancakes than you do. Simone laughed, flipping pancakes on the griddle. Those are very compelling arguments for marriage, sweetheart. Plus, you're really smart and you have your own business, which Daddy says is very attractive in a woman. Did he now? Simone glanced at Jerome, whose face had turned an interesting shade of red. I may have mentioned that successful women are attractive, Jerome muttered. In general terms. As a concept. Daddy likes successful women because Mommy wasn't successful at anything except spending money, Ava continued matter-of-factly. He says you're the opposite of Mommy. Jerome looked mortified. Ava, we don't talk about. It's okay, Simone said gently. Jerome's ex-wife had left when Ava was 4, moving to California with a man she'd met online. It had taken Ava years to stop asking when Mommy was coming home. Your Mommy made different choices than I do. That doesn't make her bad, just different. Do you want children, Miss Simone? The question hit unexpectedly hard. Simone had always assumed she'd have children someday, but David had kept putting it off. First, he wanted to establish his career. Then she was too busy with the company. There was always a reason to wait. Now at 42 that window was closing. I think I'd like to be part of a family, she said carefully. Whether that means having children or being part of a family that already exists. Ava beamed. Daddy, she wants to be part of our family. Slow down there, sweetheart, Jerome said, but he was smiling at Simone in a way that made her heart flutter. Miss Simone and I are still figuring things out. After breakfast, they walked through Piedmont Park, Ava running ahead to chase squirrels while Jerome and Simone followed at a more sedate pace. I'm sorry about the marriage interrogation, Jerome said. She's been asking a lot of questions about relationships lately. It's natural. She wants security, stability. She wants to know the adults in her life aren't going anywhere. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching Ava play on the playground equipment. Can I ask you something? Jerome said. Do you ever regret it? Pursuing the criminal charges against David? Simone considered the question. It wasn't the first time someone had asked it. Some people thought she'd been too harsh, that divorce would have been enough. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. What he did wasn't just personal betrayal. It was criminal behavior that could have destroyed my company and hurt 300 employees. If I'd let it slide, he would have done it to someone else. That's what I thought you'd say. Do you think I was too harsh? Jerome stopped walking and turned to face her. I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. I think you fought for yourself and for what was right. I think David Parker is lucky you didn't sue him for everything he'd ever owned. The divorce settlement was pretty comprehensive, Simone said dryly. He's not exactly living in luxury these days. Good. Actions have consequences. That afternoon, Simone sat in her office reviewing quarterly reports. Parker Innovations had had its best year ever, with revenue up 30% and 3 major new contracts signed. The company had been featured in Incorporated magazine as one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the Southeast. Her assistant, Rebecca, knocked on the door. There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal. David walked into her office and Simone's first thought was how much he'd changed. He'd lost weight, his hair was graying, and he looked older than his 45 years. Prison had not been kind to him. Hello, Simone. She didn't invite him to sit. What do you want, David? I wanted to apologize. For everything. You've been out for what, 2 weeks? And you came straight here? I needed to see you. To tell you I'm sorry. Simone studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, of calculation. She found only exhaustion and what looked like genuine remorse. Okay. You've apologized. Is there anything else? I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What I lost. What I threw away. What you threw away was 8 years of my life and trust. You didn't lose anything, David. You never had it to begin with. He flinched at that. I did love you. In my way. Your way wasn't love. It was convenience. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the city continued its busy rhythm, people living their lives, building their dreams, trusting their partners. I heard you're seeing someone, David said. That's none of your business. I hope he deserves you. He sees me as a person, not a bank account. So yes, he deserves me. And I deserve him. David nodded. I'm moving to Charlotte. Starting over. I wanted to say goodbye. Goodbye, David. After he left, Simone sat at her desk for a long time, processing the encounter. She felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering attraction. Just emptiness where all those complicated emotions used to live. Her phone rang. Jerome's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," he said. "How was your day?" "Interesting." David stopped by. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine." Seeing him again made me realize how much I've healed. How far I've come. That's good. I think it is good. For the first time since this whole thing started, I feel like I can really move forward. Does moving forward include dinner with a contractor and his precocious daughter tonight? Simone smiled. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. That evening, as she watched Jerome and Ava play a board game, Simone felt something she hadn't felt in years: contentment. Not the desperate gratitude she'd felt with David, not the need to prove herself worthy of love. Just simple, honest happiness. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Quarterly reports look amazing. You've officially doubled the company's value since the divorce. Revenge success is the best success." Simone typed back, "It's not revenge. It's just success." And for the first time she truly meant it. The call came at 7 in the morning while Simone was getting ready for the company's annual board meeting. Ruby Parker's voice was shaky, scared. "Simone, honey, I'm in the hospital. I fell yesterday and broke my hip. They're saying I need surgery and then months of rehabilitation." "Ruby, I'm so sorry. Are you alone? Do you need me to come? Would you?" "I know I don't have any right to ask, but the doctors want to discuss my care options, and I don't have anyone else." "Of course. I'll be there in an hour." Simone called Jerome on her way to the hospital. "I need to reschedule dinner tonight. David's mother is in the hospital." "That's the mother-in-law who supported you during the trial?" "The one and only. She's alone, and she asked me to help with medical decisions." "That says a lot about the kind of person you are. Or the kind of person she is. Ruby's one of the good ones." At the hospital, Simone found Ruby looking fragile and scared in the huge hospital bed. At 77, Ruby had always seemed indestructible, but today she looked every one of her years. "Thank you for coming," Ruby said, grasping Simone's hand. "I didn't know who else to call." "What about David's siblings?" "Michael's in Seattle and hasn't spoken to the family in 5 years. Sarah died 3 years ago, cancer. And Thomas." Ruby's expression hardened. "Thomas thinks I got what I deserved for betraying David during the trial." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You learn who people really are in crisis. I'd rather have one person I can count on than 3 people who disappoint me." The doctor explained that Ruby needed hip replacement surgery followed by extensive physical therapy. At her age, living alone afterward would be impossible. "We're looking at assisted living options," the doctor said gently. "Or in-home care if she has family support." After the doctor left, Ruby was quiet for a long time. "I never thought I'd end up in one of those places," she said finally. "I always imagined I'd die in my own home, in my own bed." "What do you want to do?" "I want to be realistic. I'm old, I'm alone, and I can't take care of myself anymore. Assisted living it is." Simone spent the day researching facilities, making phone calls, and arranging for Ruby's house to be prepared for sale. It was practical, efficient work, but it made her think about family, about aging, about the people who show up when life gets hard. That evening, she sat in Jerome's living room while Ava did homework at the kitchen table. "How was the hospital?" Jerome asked. "Sad. Ruby's looking at assisted living facilities. She's lost her independence, and she's handling it with more grace than I would." "That's hard. My grandmother went through the same thing. It's devastating to watch someone lose their autonomy." She asked me to help her sort through her belongings. 8 decades of life reduced to what fits in a 1-bedroom apartment. Jerome sat down next to her on the couch. "Are you okay?" "I'm thinking about family. About aging. About who shows up when you need them." Heavy thoughts. Ruby's ex-husband abandoned her 40 years ago. 3 of her 4 children are either dead or estranged. The only person she felt comfortable calling was her ex-daughter-in-law. Says something about the relationship you two built. Or about how alone she is. They sat quietly for a while, listening to Ava humming while she worked on math problems. "Can I ask you something?" Simone said. "Do you ever think about us? Long term, I mean." Jerome turned to face her. "Every day." "What do you think about?" "I think about coming home to you every night. I think about building something real with you. I think about Ava having a mother figure who will actually stick around." "And what scares you about that?" Jerome was quiet for a moment. "I'm scared you'll get bored. I'm a contractor from Stone Mountain. You're a CEO worth $40 million. Sometimes I wonder what you see in our simple life. Simone took his hand. I see peace. I see honesty. I see a man who celebrates my success instead of resenting it. I see a little girl who asks me about my day and means it. I see a family that wants me for who I am, not what I can provide. And what scares you? I'm scared I don't know how to be in a healthy relationship. I spent 8 years with someone who was using me. What if I've forgotten how to recognize real love? What does real love feel like to you? Simone thought about David, about the constant anxiety, the need to prove herself worthy, the gratitude that masked insecurity. Safe, she said finally. Real love feels safe. Do you feel safe with me? Yes. That's what scares me. Too easy. With David, everything was complicated, dramatic. This feels too simple. Maybe simple is what you deserve after 8 years of complicated. The next morning, Simone stood in Ruby's hospital room, watching her ex-mother-in-law prepare for surgery. I have something to ask you, Ruby said. And I want you to say no if it's not what you want. Okay. I've been thinking about assisted living and I don't want to do it. I want to die in my own home, surrounded by my own things. Ruby, let me finish. I know you have that big house and you're all alone in it. I know you're building a new life with Jerome and his daughter. I'm not asking to interfere with that. What are you asking? I'm asking if you'd consider letting an old woman live in your guest house. I'd pay rent, I'd have my own space, and I wouldn't be a burden. But I'd also not be alone. Simone stared at her. Ruby, you're the closest thing I have to family now. And maybe, if you're willing, I could be the closest thing you have to a mother. The words hit Simone unexpectedly hard. Her own mother had died 5 years ago, and she'd never had the relationship with David's family that she'd hoped for. Are you sure? I mean, given everything with David. David made his choices. You made yours. I respect the woman who fought for herself and won. 2 hours later, as Ruby was wheeled into surgery, Simone called Jerome. How would you feel about having a grandmother figure in our lives? What do you mean? Simone explained Ruby's proposal. When she finished, Jerome was quiet. That's a big decision, he said finally. Too big? Too fast? No. I think it's perfect. Ava's never had grandparents. And you'd have family. Are you sure? Simone, you just proved that you're willing to show up for people even when it's complicated. That's exactly the kind of person I want in our lives permanently. Permanently? I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your success, your complicated heart. I love the way you make Ava laugh and the way you fight for what's right. I want to build a life with you, and I want Ruby to be part of that life if she wants to be. I love you too, Simone said, and for the first time, the words felt entirely uncomplicated. That afternoon, she sat beside Ruby's hospital bed as she woke up from surgery. How do you feel about having a very successful, very stubborn daughter-in-law? Simone asked. Ruby smiled, still groggy from anesthesia. I feel like I'm the luckiest woman in Atlanta. Good. Because we have some serious planning to do. I'm thinking about converting the guest house into a proper apartment. Jerome can do the work. It'll be perfect. Are you sure? I'm sure. We're family now. And family shows up for each other. 1 year later, Simone stood at the altar of the historic Swan House in Atlanta, wearing her grandmother's pearl necklace and a smile that reached her eyes. The wedding was small, 50 people who actually mattered instead of 300 business acquaintances who expected invitations. Ruby sat in the front row in her wheelchair, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Next to her, Ava bounced excitedly in her flower girl dress, whispering commentary about the ceremony to anyone within earshot. The bride looks beautiful, Ava announced loudly enough for the entire gathering to hear. And she makes really good pancakes. Laughter rippled through the guests. This was exactly the kind of wedding Simone had always wanted. Full of joy instead of obligation, celebration instead of performance. Jerome stood waiting for her, wearing a perfectly tailored suit but looking completely comfortable in his own skin. When their eyes met, his smile was pure happiness without calculation, love without conditions. Diane stood beside her as maid of honor, having spent the morning crying about how proud she was and how far Simone had come. Who gives this woman to be married? The minister asked. She gives herself, Ruby said firmly from the front row. And she's never needed anyone else's permission. More laughter, and Simone felt her heart swell with love for this chosen family who understood her so completely. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, and when Jerome spoke about loving her strength, celebrating her success, and promising to be a partner rather than a threat to her independence, Simone felt tears streaming down her face. When it was her turn, she looked out at the faces of people who'd supported her through the worst period of her life and were now celebrating the best. "Jerome," she said, her voice steady despite the tears, "you taught me the difference between being grateful for love and being worthy of love. You showed me what it means to be seen, valued, and celebrated exactly as I am." She glanced at Ava, who was grinning widely. "You both showed me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choosing each other every day and showing up even when it's hard." The kiss was sweet, unhurried, and met with enthusiastic applause led by Ava's cheering. At the reception held in Ruby's beautifully restored garden, Simone moved through the crowd feeling lighter than she had in years. Parker Innovations employees mingled with Jerome's construction crew. Diane's law partners chatted with neighbors from the old neighborhood where Simone had grown up. "Speech. Speech," someone called out. Jerome clinked his glass and the crowd quieted. "2 years ago," he said, "I met a woman who was renovating her office space. She was brilliant, successful, and absolutely terrifying in business meetings." Laughter from the Parker Innovations crowd. "But when I got to know her, I discovered something else. She was kind. She was generous. She was strong enough to fight for herself and gentle enough to take care of an elderly woman who needed family." He looked at Ruby, who was beaming with pride. "She taught me that real strength isn't about never getting hurt. It's about healing from hurt and using that experience to build something better." Jerome turned to Simone. "You built something better, baby. You built this family, this community, this life that's based on truth instead of lies, love instead of manipulation, choice instead of obligation." The applause was warm and genuine. Simone stood to respond. "3 years ago, I thought I knew what my life looked like. I thought I was happy. I thought I was loved. I thought I understood my own worth." She looked out at the faces of people who'd supported her journey. "I was wrong about all of those things. But sometimes being wrong about everything is exactly what you need to discover who you really are." She found Ruby in the crowd. "I learned that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. Ruby, you showed up when your son disappointed you. You chose truth over loyalty and justice over comfort. Thank you for being the mother I needed." Ruby wiped her eyes, smiling through tears. "Diane, you showed up with legal expertise, fierce friendship, and wine when I needed to cry. You helped me fight for myself when I'd forgotten how." She looked at the Parker Innovations employees scattered throughout the crowd. "My team showed up by working harder, performing better, and proving that a company built on integrity will always outperform a company built on theft and lies." Finally, she looked at Jerome and Ava. "And you two showed up with patience, with love, with the radical idea that I didn't need to prove myself worthy of your affection. You loved me as I was while supporting who I wanted to become." Jerome reached for her hand. "I thought David's betrayal broke me," Simone continued. "But it didn't break me, it freed me. It freed me from a relationship built on lies. It freed me from the belief that I should be grateful for the bare minimum. It freed me to discover what real love actually feels like." She raised her champagne glass. "To everyone who shows up. To everyone who fights for truth. To everyone who believes that we deserve to be loved for who we are, not what we can provide. Thank you for helping me build something real." The applause was thunderous. As the crowd dispersed back to conversation and dancing, Ava tugged on Simone's dress. "Miss Simone, Mom, can I ask you something?" "Mom." The word sent warmth through Simone's entire body. "Of course, sweetheart. Are you happy now? Really, really happy?" Simone looked around the garden. Ruby was holding court near the dessert table, telling stories about David's childhood to anyone who would listen. Not mean stories, just honest ones. Jerome was dancing with one of her elderly neighbors, making her laugh like she was 20 years old again. Diane was deep in conversation with Jerome's foreman about patent law. Parker Innovations employees were teaching construction workers the electric slide. "Yes," Simone said, picking Ava up and spinning her around. "I'm really, really happy." Later that evening, as the last guest departed and the catering staff cleaned up, Simone and Jerome sat on the porch swing Ruby had insisted on installing. "Good party," Jerome said, pulling Simone closer. "The best. Did you see Ruby teaching your crew poker? I saw her winning $20 off my foreman." They swayed gently, listening to the sounds of the city settling into evening. "Any regrets?" Jerome asked. Simone thought about it. About David, about the 8 years that felt wasted, about the pain and betrayal and public humiliation. "No regrets," she said finally. "Everything that happened led me here. Led me to you, to Ava, to Ruby, to understanding my own strength. Even the bad parts? Especially the bad parts. They taught me to recognize the good parts. Jerome kissed the top of her head. I love you, Mrs. Mitchell. I love you too, Mr. Mitchell. From inside the house they could hear Ava's voice calling out, Mom. Dad. Ruby says we can make s'mores. Coming. Simone called back. As they walked into the house, their house filled with their chosen family, Simone felt a profound sense of completion. Not because she'd found someone to complete her, but because she'd finally learned to be complete on her own. The little girl who'd dreamed of building something important had done it. The young woman who'd hoped for true love had found it. The successful businesswoman who'd thought she had to choose between ambition and family had discovered she could have both. David had tried to steal her fortune, her company, and her self-worth. Instead, he'd given her the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that she was strong enough to rebuild, wise enough to recognize real love, and valuable enough to demand it. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.